Sophia had always been the kind of daughter parents dreamed of. Disciplined, intelligent, respectful. From an early age, she understood the weight of expectations placed upon her. Growing up in a conservative, traditional household, she learned to suppress her own desires in favor of what her parents deemed acceptable. Her father, an esteemed lawyer, and her mother, a well-known socialite, had mapped out her future before she even had the chance to dream of one herself. Good grades, an elite university, a prestigious career, and of course a husband who came from the right background. For most of her life, Sophia followed the script. She excelled academically, attended one of the top business schools in the country, and even pursued a career in marketing, something her parents tolerated as long as it led to financial stability. But everything changed when she met Marcus. She hadn't been looking for love when she met him. Their first encounter was entirely by chance, one of those moments that, in hindsight, felt almost like fate. It was a rainy afternoon and Sophia had been rushing through the crowded city streets, late for a meeting, when she slipped on the wet pavement outside a small coffee shop. Just as she braced herself for an embarrassing fall, strong hands caught her. "You okay?" His voice was warm, steadying her even more than his grip. She looked up and found herself staring into the deep brown eyes of a man she had never seen before. He was dressed casually, dark jeans and a simple sweater. His expression a mixture of concern and amusement. Yeah, I think so," she stammered, straightening herself. He smiled. And for reasons she couldn't quite explain, she smiled back. That was how it started. Their relationship developed naturally. Marcus was unlike anyone she had ever known. He was kind, intelligent, ambitious, but most of all, he made her feel seen in a way she never had before. He wasn't from the world she had been raised in. He hadn't grown up with privilege, hadn't attended Ivy League schools, hadn't come from a family with an extensive network of wealthy connections. He had worked for everything he had, juggling jobs while putting himself through college, and now, he was building his own business from the ground up. His passion for life, his determination, and his unwavering belief in himself, and in her, drew her in like nothing else ever had. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt free. But she also knew the inevitable storm that was coming. She had kept her relationship with Marcus a secret for months, dreading the moment she would have to introduce him to her parents. She knew how they would react. They had always been clear about what kind of man she was supposed to marry, someone with wealth, influence, and a prestigious last name. Someone who could continue the family legacy, as her father often said. Marcus, despite being everything Sophia wanted, did not fit that mold. When the day finally came, she braced herself for the worst. She had rehearsed the conversation in her head 1,000 times, preparing every argument, every justification. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had naively hoped that maybe, just maybe, her parents would see past their prejudices and recognize Marcus for the incredible man he was. She was wrong. Dinner started off tense. Her mother's smile was tight, her father's gaze cold. Marcus, ever the gentleman, did his best to engage them in conversation, but it was clear they had no interest in getting to know him. They barely acknowledged his words, responding with clipped, polite phrases while exchanging disapproving glances when they thought Sophia wasn't looking. Then, halfway through the meal, her father set his fork down with a deliberate clink against the china and leaned back in his chair. "Sophia," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Can I speak to you alone for a moment?" She knew what was coming, but she nodded and followed him into his study. The moment the door closed, the facade of civility dropped. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was low, but filled with restrained fury. Sophia clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm introducing you to the man I love." Her father scoffed. "Love? Do you even hear yourself?" He gestured vaguely toward the dining room. "This is not love, Sophia. This is a mistake. A phase. And I won't allow it." She felt her heart tighten. "You won't allow it? You think you can just throw away everything we've given you? Everything we've built for you?" His voice rose slightly. "You are meant for more than this." She swallowed hard, her hands shaking. "Marcus is a good man. He works hard. He is not one of us," her father cut in sharply. "And he never will be." The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy fog. It was then that she realized, there was no convincing him. No amount of reasoning, no heartfelt speech would change his mind. Her parents had made their decision long before they had even met Marcus. That night, her mother delivered the final blow. "If you choose him," she said quietly, her voice void of emotion, "then you are no longer our daughter." Sophia felt the air leave her lungs. She looked between her parents, searching for any sign of hesitation, any indication that they didn't mean it. But their expressions remained cold, unwavering. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then with a steady voice, she spoke the words that would change everything. "Then I guess this is goodbye." She turned, walked out of the room and back into Marcus's waiting arms. That night, she packed her things and left the only home she had ever known. She had no safety net, no financial support, no family to turn to. But she had Marcus. And for the first time in her life she had herself. The first night away from her parents' home felt surreal. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed in Marcus's small apartment, staring at the floor, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Only hours ago, she had a family, a home, a financial safety net. Now she had none of those things. Marcus sat beside her, his hand gently resting on hers, offering silent reassurance. She wanted to believe that love was enough, that they would find a way to build a life together despite everything. But as the weight of reality settled in, doubt crept into her mind. She had walked away from wealth and security, from the life she had always known. She had done it because she loved Marcus, because she believed in them. But love wouldn't pay the bills. Love wouldn't erase the fact that she had no savings, no stable job, and no backup plan. Sophia had always been independent in many ways. She worked hard in school, landed internships, and prided herself on her ambition. But she had never truly been on her own. Her parents had always been there, a silent force ensuring that she never had to struggle. Now, for the first time in her life, she was completely alone, except for Marcus. The first few weeks were the hardest. Sophia quickly realized just how much she had taken for granted. The spacious bedroom she had grown up in was replaced by a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. There was no cleaning service to tidy up, no stocked refrigerator waiting for her. Every penny mattered now. Marcus did his best to support them, but his income was barely enough to cover rent and necessities. He had his own struggles. His startup was in its early stages, and he was pouring everything he had into making it work. He encouraged her, told her that they would figure it out together. But she hated the idea of depending entirely on him. She needed to stand on her own 2 feet. Finding a job, however, was easier said than done. Despite her impressive resume, Sophia quickly learned that the job market didn't care about her elite education as much as she had believed. The marketing industry was competitive, and without family connections to open doors for her, she was just another applicant in an endless sea of candidates. She spent hours every day sending out resumes, writing cover letters, attending interviews that led nowhere. Rejections piled up, each one chipping away at her confidence. She started taking on temporary gigs, anything that would bring in money. She did freelance marketing work for small businesses, picked up shifts at a local coffee shop, and even considered applying for retail jobs just to make ends meet. It was humbling. Just a few months ago, she had attended glamorous events with her parents, surrounded by influential people. Now, she was barely scraping by, her hands sore from working long hours, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. There were nights when she lay awake, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Her parents hadn't reached out since the night she left. No calls, no texts, nothing. She had thought maybe after some time they would soften, that they would realize she hadn't ruined her life, that she was still their daughter. But the silence was deafening. She saw their lives continue from a distance. Social media showed her mother attending charity galas, her father giving speeches at prestigious events. It was as if she had never existed. The pain was sharper than she expected. But Marcus was there always. He never let her wallow for too long. He reminded her that they were building something real, something that wasn't dependent on privilege or family expectations. He believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. One day, after yet another rejection email, she sat on the apartment floor, laptop open, staring blankly at the screen. "I don't know what else to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus knelt beside her, his hand resting on her knee. Then maybe it's time to stop waiting for someone else to give you a chance. She looked at him confused. What do you mean? You're brilliant, Sophia. You don't need a company to tell you that. You've done freelance work, right? What if you built something of your own? She frowned. Like what? Like a business. You understand marketing better than most people. You've seen firsthand how companies operate. Why not offer your skills to people who actually need them? The idea planted itself in her mind and refused to leave. For the next few weeks, she threw herself into research. If companies wouldn't hire her, she would create her own opportunities. She built a website, reached out to small businesses, and started offering marketing consulting at affordable rates. She had no investors, no team, just her skills, determination, and a belief that she could make this work. At first, it was slow. Clients trickled in, most of them skeptical of hiring someone who wasn't backed by a well-known agency. But Sophia refused to give up. She worked tirelessly, proving herself with every project. She stayed up late studying market trends, refining her strategies, learning how to negotiate contracts and set fair prices for her work. Marcus was her biggest cheerleader. He celebrated every small victory. Her first paying client, her first successful campaign, the first time a business recommended her to someone else. It wasn't glamorous. There were still months when money was tight, when she questioned whether she was chasing an impossible dream. But for the first time in her life, she was building something that was entirely hers. The struggle was far from over, but she could feel the shift. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting for something greater. Building a business from scratch was never going to be easy, but it was the challenge Sophia needed. After weeks of uncertainty and financial strain, things began to shift. Slowly, very slowly, her small marketing consultancy started gaining traction. It wasn't as if the doors of success had flung open overnight, but there was a glimmer of something, a spark of potential she hadn't felt before. The late nights, the rejection, the self-doubt, it all seemed to build to this point, where she could see the fruits of her hard work beginning to take shape. The first few months were a blur of anxiety and ambition. There were times when she felt completely overwhelmed by the weight of managing the business alone. Every day was a mix of creative strategy, chasing invoices, marketing her services, and handling the countless small details that inevitably popped up when running a one-person show. But there was something incredibly empowering about it all, even when it was exhausting. Sophia found herself more focused than she had ever been in her life. Without the distractions of family expectations, societal pressure, or the expectations of others, she was free to build something entirely on her own terms. Marcus, as always, was a steady support. He had always believed in her, but now that he was seeing the potential of her business firsthand, he became even more determined to see it succeed. He helped her refine her strategies, provided emotional support during moments of self-doubt, and even brought his own entrepreneurial knowledge to the table, offering advice on financial management, negotiating contracts, and building long-term business relationships. Still, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The first clients she managed to secure were small businesses, mom-and-pop shops struggling to get noticed in a competitive market. While it felt like a victory to land these clients, it was often a frustrating process. Many of these businesses had very limited budgets, and even more limited expectations. They didn't understand the power of marketing, and sometimes expected results without investing enough in their campaigns. Sophia had to learn the hard way how to manage client expectations and educate them on the true value of what she was offering. She would often find herself working twice as hard for half the reward, especially when some of the clients would push back on her rates or question her approach. But she learned from every misstep. She refined her pitching techniques, improved her communication skills, and set clearer boundaries. Slowly but surely, she built a portfolio that was enough to impress more established businesses. One day a breakthrough came. A client she had worked with, a small local bakery, referred her to a mid-sized retail chain. The company was looking to revamp its marketing strategy and expand its digital presence, and they needed someone who could take charge of a complete overhaul. Sophia was elated but nervous. She wasn't sure if she was ready for such a big leap, but Marcus reassured her, saying, "This is your time. You've done the work. Now go show them what you're made of." The pitch meeting was everything Sophia had worked for. She spent days preparing, researching the company, understanding their market, and refining her ideas. She walked into the meeting room with her portfolio in hand, confident but still aware that this could be a make-or-break moment. The client was impressed with her proposals and offered her the project. It was a game-changer. The retail chain had a much larger budget than her previous clients, and the scope of the work was far greater. This project would give her the opportunity to prove herself on a much bigger stage, and she threw herself into it with everything she had. The campaign was a success. It was challenging, but it brought incredible results. The brand's sales went up by 30% in the first quarter. Their social media engagement tripled, and they were able to reach a broader audience than ever before. Word began to spread, and soon, more clients reached out, all eager to work with Sophia. She had proven herself, not just to them but to herself. With each new project, Sophia refined her approach. She became more strategic, more confident, and more efficient. She hired a small team of freelancers, graphic designers, copywriters, and a web developer, so that she could offer her clients a full range of services. The business began to expand beyond her wildest dreams. And while there were still moments of doubt, she had started to see herself as a business owner in a way she hadn't before. One day, as Sophia sat in her office reviewing the progress of several ongoing projects, she realized just how far she had come. Not just in terms of the business, but in terms of her own growth. She was no longer the girl who had been dependent on her parents. She wasn't the person who feared rejection or who doubted her own worth. She had built something from nothing. A thriving business, a client base, and a reputation for delivering results. It was around this time that she received an unexpected call. Her mother's name flashed on her phone screen. Sophia's heart raced. She hadn't heard from her parents since the night she left. There had been no word, no apology, no acknowledgement of the choice she had made. So when her mother's voice came through the receiver, it was almost surreal. "Sophia," her mother said, her voice soft but filled with hesitation. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Sophia's response was measured, though her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. "Yes, it has." Her mother's voice faltered slightly. "I wanted to talk to you. About everything. About what happened." Sophia remained silent, unsure of how to respond. The years of silence between them had built a wall that now felt impossible to tear down. "We've been following what you've been doing, Sophia," her mother continued, a hint of pride in her voice. "And we're impressed. I never thought you had it in you, but you've done well. Your father and we've been thinking about you a lot." Sophia swallowed hard, the emotion threatening to spill over. "You've been thinking about me?" Her voice was calm, but beneath it, there was an edge. "Yes," her mother said. "We're sorry, Sophia. We were wrong. We made a mistake." Sophia felt a pang in her chest. She had never expected this call, never thought they would admit their fault. But hearing it now, after everything, after all the pain and hardship she had endured, it wasn't as satisfying as she had imagined. "I appreciate that, Mom," Sophia said, her voice steady but distant. "But I've already moved on. I'm not the person I was when I left, and things can never go back to how they were." Her mother sighed, a long, heavy exhale. "I understand, but I want you to know that we're proud of you. We were wrong, and I see now how much you've accomplished." There was a long silence between them. The conversation had shifted in a direction neither of them had expected, but it didn't change anything. Sophia had built a life for herself, and while she would always carry the memories of her family, the wounds had healed in a way that no apology could undo. "I've made my peace with it," Sophia said softly. "I hope you can too." And with that, she ended the conversation. Later that evening, she sat with Marcus, the man who had stood by her through every trial. He was the first person who had believed in her when no one else did. He wasn't just her partner in business but in life. They had built something together, something real. As she looked at him, she realized that she no longer needed validation from her parents. She had created a life for herself, one that was meaningful and fulfilling, with or without their approval. And as the small victories continued to pile up, Sophia knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. As the months turned into years, Sophia's business continued to grow, and the emotional weight of the decisions she had made began to shift. She had transformed from a young woman, who had been uncertain of her place in the world, into a strong, self-assured entrepreneur. Her work was no longer a struggle for survival. It was a testament to everything she had fought for. She was no longer just the daughter of successful parents, but a force in her own right. A woman who had built something that could stand on its own. Something that carried her identity and her dreams, independent of anyone else's expectations. Her relationship with Marcus deepened, evolving beyond the initial thrill of a young romance. They had weathered storms together, not just in their personal lives but also in their careers. Marcus's startup too had taken off, and the two of them now shared not just a living space but a future that was tied together in ways that were deeply fulfilling. They had created a small but tight-knit family, built not on blood but on mutual respect, love and shared ambition. Their apartment, once small and bare, now felt like a home, a sanctuary where their dreams could breathe. But while Sophia's life had flourished, the shadow of her past remained. It wasn't something she thought about every day, but the memories of the estrangement from her family, her parents' rejection, still haunted her from time to time. There were moments when the loneliness crept in, even in the middle of a crowded room, when she remembered the family dinners, the holidays spent together, and the warmth of her childhood home. It wasn't so much that she wanted to return to the life they had offered her, but the absence of that relationship still left a void that she wasn't entirely sure how to fill. At the same time, she had come to accept that her parents' disownment of her, though painful, had been necessary. If she hadn't left, if she hadn't walked away from the gilded cage they had prepared for her, she might never have realized her own potential. The woman she was now, the woman she had become through hardship, self-reliance and passion, was far stronger and more resilient than the version of herself that had lived under their roof. The business was thriving, and Sophia had built a loyal client base. She was sought after by companies who wanted to work with someone who had proven herself in the trenches, not just because of her education or connections. She had carved out a niche for herself as a marketing consultant who understood the real-world struggles of businesses, and who was willing to work relentlessly to deliver results. Her success was no longer a matter of luck. It was a product of years of dedication, countless sleepless nights, and the unwavering belief that she could create her own destiny. In the third year of her business, she hit a milestone she had once only dreamed of. Her company had grown beyond what she thought was possible. It wasn't just a small consultancy anymore. It was a marketing agency, with a team of talented professionals working alongside her. She had hired full-time employees, and together, they had built a reputation for being the best in the business. They had landed major contracts with national brands, something Sophia had never even dared to imagine back when she was working from Marcus's tiny apartment. She was no longer just a marketer. She was a leader, a mentor, and an inspiration to those around her. The people who worked for her saw her not only as a boss, but as someone who had fought through the same struggles they were now facing. She had built a culture of resilience within her company, teaching her team to embrace failure, learn from it, and grow stronger. Every success felt sweeter because it had been earned. There was no privilege here, just hard work and determination. But success brought its own set of challenges. The more the business grew, the more she had to let go of the hands-on work she had once loved. She found herself navigating new issues, hiring and managing a team, dealing with finances, attending meetings with larger clients who had different expectations, and handling the logistics of scaling up. Sometimes it felt overwhelming. The pressure to perform was constant, and it didn't help that, as her company gained more recognition, the attention from competitors and critics increased. Sophia was no stranger to criticism. She had faced rejection from her family and judgment from those who couldn't see beyond her background. But now, as her business expanded, the scrutiny came from other industry professionals. There were those who saw her as a self-made success story and resented it, believing she had somehow cheated the system or didn't deserve to be where she was. It didn't bother her as much as it once would have, but there were still days when she felt the sting of their words. Then came the phone call that would set everything in motion. It was late one evening, and Sophia had just finished a long day of meetings and brainstorming sessions. The phone rang, and the name on the screen made her freeze. Her father. For a moment she hesitated, unsure whether to answer. It had been years since they had spoken, and their absence from her life had become a silent, accepted truth. But curiosity, combined with something else, something deeper, made her pick up. Sophia, her father's voice was steady, but there was a noticeable tension in his words. I know we haven't spoken in a long time, but I need to tell you something. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of emotions surging to the surface. What is it, Dad? She asked, her voice a bit colder than she intended. I wanted to apologize, he said. I know I haven't been a good father, and I know I hurt you with the way I reacted when you left. Your mother and we've thought a lot about it. And we were wrong, Sophia. I was wrong. Sophia closed her eyes, her mind racing. She hadn't expected an apology, especially not after all these years. It felt surreal, like something that belonged in a movie, not her real life. I don't need you to apologize, she replied softly, her voice surprisingly steady. I made my choice and I'm okay with it. I'm the woman I am today because of what I went through. I wouldn't change a thing. Her father let out a long sigh, and for a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was more fragile than she had ever heard it. I wanted you to know that we've been following everything you've done. Your success. Your strength. And I'm proud of you, Sophia. We're both proud. I never thought you had it in you, but you've proved me wrong. The words hit her harder than she had expected. All the years of rejection, of doubt, of thinking she was not enough, it all rushed to the surface. But now, with the weight of the past, she simply nodded to herself, as if everything she had fought for had finally been acknowledged. I appreciate that, Dad, she said softly. But I've already moved on. I've created my own life, and it's enough for me. I've built this with my own hands. And I don't need your approval anymore. There was a pause before her father spoke again, his voice heavy. I understand. And I respect that. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Sophia hung up the phone with a strange sense of finality. It wasn't the closure she had imagined, but it was enough. She had spent so many years longing for her family's acceptance, but in that moment, she realized that she had outgrown the need for it. She had created her own path, her own legacy, one that had nothing to do with the expectations of others. That night, as she sat with Marcus, reflecting on everything she had achieved, she realized something profound. She had become her own woman, independent, strong, and fulfilled. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned that family didn't always mean blood, that success wasn't about meeting expectations, and that the true measure of a person was how they handled adversity. Sophia was no longer the young woman who had walked away from her parents' mansion with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of dreams. She was the woman who had built her own empire, who had earned every step of success, and who had learned to love herself along the way. Her story was not one of bitterness or regret, but one of resilience and triumph. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that there was nothing she couldn't achieve. This was just the beginning.